We are back for the latest installment of the preview show with myself, Ian O'Neill, and as always with Harry Powell, and we're going to take you through all of the next UFC installment. That's in Singapore. That's at the wee hours of the morning over here in Canada at a fairly respectable time back home, or wherever you may be looking at it at Fairies. Max Holloway, Korean Zombie Chan Sung Jung will fight in the main event there. Anthony Smith in Spanish or co-main event, and a couple of other decent fights. I mean, I'm not really calling that one a decent fight, but there is a couple of decent fights spread out here. We see the return of a couple of fighters. We have an absolutely belter of a women's flyweight fight in Erin Blanchfield and Talia Santos, like kind of thrown into the mix here. We'll talk about that when we get to it, Harry. But first, as I always do, good sir, I'll send it over to you maybe for your overall landscape view or opinion on this card.
This card is being held up by the superstars at the top. And this card is being bolted together with some really fascinating prospects, both in the women's flyweight division, but also a couple of the others that we'll sprinkle through as we get there. And, you know, we've said it time and time again that I think that there is something more interesting about cards in the Asian regions because predominantly they are stacked with Asian fighters, and those are fighters that we don't necessarily see unless they blow up like a Korean Zombie. I can't believe I forgot that man's name. How horrendous of me. But when you blow up like a Korean Zombie, you're going to be dragged all over the shop, right? And that's fine. But it's very rare that we get to see the proliferation of all of the talent that's on that Eastern region. And so it's always great to have a Singapore card. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some absolute stinking fights on this card, and we'll get to them. But, you know, as we've said, we've been blessed this year. We really have been blessed with a lot of fantastic fight cards. And so any fight card that gives me a couple of prospects that are really interesting, a number one contender, and a Max Holloway Korean Zombie, sign me up for that. I got no problem with any of that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the same too. Look at. I'm probably not going to watch the prelims live. They start at 3 a.m. and I know anyone who's listening in Europe is like, well, I'm moving house at the minute, so energy needs to be saved. So I will watch back the prelims. The main card for me will start at 6 a.m. So that's doable. I'll be up. I'm not too far away from being up that time most mornings. So, that truth be told is probably I could wake up at 4 o'clock. I could wake up at 5 o'clock and curiosity might get the better of me, but I probably best save my strength for the move and get this as much sleep in as possible. But with those kind of cards, like this one is a different one. I like these ones too for, you know, the introduction of Asian talent onto the roster. We get to see a little bit more of them. You know, Asian audiences are different to US audiences. A lot of respect shown during fights. Obviously, looking back to the Pride days, you know, they love a good fight, but they're also very respectful and knowledgeable. We won't be hearing any Ric Flair woos during these fights anyway, that's for sure. But as you said about the Asian talent, 8 fighters from Asia are around those areas fighting on this card, so it's going to be a good, fantastic showcase. And the main man himself, maybe for the last couple of years in Asian mixed martial arts, especially on the US or the UFC side of things, is the Korean Zombie. He takes on Max Holloway in the co-main event, Harry. And, you know, I kind of like this fight for both guys. I mean, it's a fun fight that we always kind of wanted to see. Could have happened at a different time, possibly so. But we're here. It's going to be fun. And it's a fight that, you know, maybe doesn't have title jeopardy on it. Maybe it does. I don't know. I mean, it feels like you could throw Max Holloway into a title fight anytime. He's kind of that good. But, you know, we've seen him with Volkanovski enough times now. We don't need to see it again. So maybe that would be the first question I would pose to you, is that the lack of maybe title jeopardy or jeopardy full stop in this main event, does it slightly take away from the spectacle that it's going to be? Because I mean, it's a surefire banger, to be honest, really, with the two of these guys and their style and what they bring into the octagon.
No, is the answer to me. It doesn't take away from it. Mostly because I don't think either of them are going to get a title shot ever again. Like unless something drastic happens, and let's say Volkanovski fights Ilia Topuria and Topuria wins that fight, there's going to be an immediate rematch. If Ilia Topuria wins that fight again, then sure, maybe Max Holloway has a route back to a title shot. But I just don't think that we're going to see anything different from Max Holloway in this Alexander Volkanovski 50th rematch, right? I just don't think that they're moving on the same trajectories. I think Alexander Volkanovski is progressing. He has a ton of momentum behind him, ton of skill progression that we've been seeing over his last couple of fights. And Max Holloway seems to be doing the opposite, right? Like I don't mean that disrespectfully. Max Holloway has been fighting in the UFC since
it's a totally fair statement, man. It's a totally fair statement, yeah.
But I think that the reason why I like this matchup, and specifically I like the timing of this matchup, could we have seen it 5 years ago? Yeah, sure. Absolutely. No problem. But Korean Zombie has been a veteran for a long time, and Max Holloway is slowly creeping into that veteran declining era of his career, right? And so to see two veterans go together, I never have a problem with that, right? That's fine. That's fair matchmaking. If we saw Ilia Topuria versus Chang Sung-jung, I've got a problem with that,
Yes,
I've got a serious problem with that. But this matchup, don't get me wrong, I think there is a heavy favorite in this fight, but for the most part, this is a veteran versus a veteran. And I don't have any issues with those. And like you say, it's a surefire banger. Both of these guys, we're going to see MMA, right? We're absolutely going to see MMA from both guys. And I couldn't be more excited. I really, really couldn't. I think it's an absolute screamer of a fight.
Do both of these guys kind of gone on the same career trajectory as well, Harry, in kind of how they developed their skills during their career arc to what they were when we first seen them inside the cage to where they are right now. And both guys, I think, have done excellently in kind of shoring up their games and becoming from brawler status into kind of technicians per se. Now, the Korean Zombie still can be guilty at times of walking guys down and using his chin as defense, probably more so than anybody else. But I mean, in the loose terms, I would say, I feel that Max Holloway was a guy who was a lot more wilder and who is a more technical fighter now. And the same with Korean Zombie, who, maybe he's still a little bit wilder, maybe a small bit wilder than what Max Holloway is right now at this stage. But he, in his limits of his game, has kind of shored things up and tightened things up and is more of a technical striker as well. Is that something maybe that you have seen or in the development of both of these guys' career?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if we talk about Max Holloway was training on the UFC game at the start of his career. Right?
So he says, yeah.
Like he was saying that he was playing the UFC game. He'd throw a combination and he'd be like, oh, sure, that looks good. I'll try that in the gym. And then would go and try it in the gym, right? And he himself, and I do believe him, frankly, because he talked recently about the place that he lives and how it's very not underdeveloped, that's not the right word, but it's very authentic Hawaii, right? It's very ungentrified. It's extremely authentic. And he's like, there's just not a lot
thoughts and prayers to anybody out there in Hawaii right now going through a difficult time. We just have to mention that as well.
100%. But he's mentioning that, his coaches didn't really know how to coach him either, right? There was a little bit of striking, the most spurious of grappling, and they kind of all just figured it out together. And I think when you look at Max Holloway, if you look at the developmental progression that he's gone through, it's absolutely astounding to realize the potential that he has. And the Korean Zombie, I mean, okay, he's coming from a fighting area, right? The Asian market is absolutely combat sports mad. And so he certainly wouldn't have struggled for training. But we're looking at a guy, like you said, that grew up in the UFC, technically as in like his skills grew up in the UFC. Max Holloway literally grew up in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think you could say the same about Korean Zombie as well. Like my first introduction to the Korean Zombie was way back at the WEC when he came in and fought in that epic battle against Leonard Garcia. It was the time where the two of them just decided to throw down, and it was actually a fight that I was showing to my friends at the time to try and get them into mixed martial arts. It was so insane. WC technically under the Zuffa banner as well, coming up through that and slowly got integrated into the UFC featherweight division as well. So, two guys who've been around, this kind of setting for many years. It's actually funny to think that it's taken this long that for them to kind of combine and fight together and the same, like against one another as well. And I'm very interested to see, you know, I feel a big question in this fight, Harry, is going to be how Max Holloway approaches it, because I think he could go in there and out technique Korean Zombie, no problem whatsoever. I'm wondering, is he going to maybe make the decision to bow down and get into a war just for entertainment's sake? And I wouldn't put it past, not a wise move, I would say, but a move that I wouldn't put past Max Holloway either. We've seen him in some crazy moments inside in the octagon. When the two of these face off, what are your main thoughts on how they should be facing off against one another, and maybe what you think will happen as well? There's two differences, isn't there?
Yeah. Like, one thing that I found very interesting about Max Holloway, and in his recent media, he's been asked the retirement question quite a lot recently, right? And in those questions, in responses to those questions, his response is, I have another 6 years of fighting, right? Now, I don't know whether that's 6 years at featherweight, whether that's 6 years and he's going to take a year to finally move up to 155 and end his career at 155. Whether, I don't know, I don't know what that means, right? But what I do know is that he, in his brain at least, is thinking that he still has a significant portion left to give. And so if that's the case, then I, as his coaching team, thanks Max Holloway for approaching me, and we did a great deal and fair play to you, I would be asking him to go in here and use the significant reach advantage that he has, use the footwork, use the head movement, and then I'm going to ask him to mix in takedowns. I'm going to ask him to mix in takedowns. Now, I know we haven't seen Max Holloway hit many takedowns. The last one was in the Yair Rodriguez fight when, he was having a bit of trouble and he took the fight down. Grand, no problem. But I would like to see him mix it in. Not the Korean Zombie is a bad grappler at all. The Korean Zombie is a guy that will happily sit in a pocket, plant his feet, wait, and then throw when the opportunity comes. And so if you can force Korean Zombie to think about something else, if you can force him to think about not keeping his feet static, because if he does, I'm going to take you down, and then we've got that whole fucking problem, then we might, as Max Holloway, be able to beat him back and push him back far, far, far earlier than you usually would, right? Because if this turns into a war of attrition, and I'll sort of do this as a sandwich, because that's what I think is going to happen, right? I think this is going to be a war of attrition.
Yeah.
Then it becomes a far closer fight than maybe it should be, because Max Holloway's chin is ungodly, absolutely ungodly, like
insane.
Again,
and that's the thing, that's the problem with Korean Zombie here, is that if he try, what do we say to someone who's more technical than another fighter? So we say the fighter who is the least technical needs to draw the more technical fighter into a kind of a battle, into a war, into this kind of mad exchange where guys are trading punches and there's no real technique. But that's also a problem if you're going to approach it that way with Max Holloway, because he's well able to do that as well as going out there and out techniquing people. And it's like, for me, I think the weakness with Korean Zombie and attack mindedly is that he does get drawn into kind of following people's footworks and walking onto shots as well. We saw that with Brian Ortega. And I think if Brian Ortega can do it, and Max Holloway certainly can do it, if he chooses to. If he chooses to, I think is the big one here, isn't it, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, my read, one of the points I was going to make is everyone will remember that Brian Ortega came back after a little bit of a layoff and then came in and put an absolute clinic on the Korean Zombie. And everyone was like, holy fuck, like what's happened to this guy? He can box now. And then in his next fight, it was like, sure, he can't actually. Like, it was just a flash in the pan type job. And if the Korean Zombie bites down on his mouthpiece and just walks forward, I think it's a really, really, really dangerous recipe for him. I really, really do. I think if I'm fighting Max Holloway at this stage of his career, the answer to me is to look at the blueprint that Yair Rodriguez set, which is stand your ground, land a massive shot, and then move. And then you look at the Alexander Volkanovski, which is you try and tap away at the legs, sap away at the legs, get some energy gone from the legs, slow him down a little bit, work the body as much as you can, and then keep moving, right? This is a 5-round fight, which 2-3 years ago, I would say that's a horrendous thing for Korean Zombie because Max Holloway grows as the fight comes on. But if you can start to level that progression out by chopping the leg, by touching the body, by making sure that he's in a situation where that momentum isn't equaled by a gas tank, you absolutely have a chance. Like, I would probably be looking at employing some form of Chito Vera type tactics here, right? Where you're not going to outvolume him. You're just not. You're absolutely not going to outvolume him. But if you can make it similar to the Rob Font fight, where you know the volume is coming, but you're going to stand your ground, you're going to look for a shot every exchange. And if you throw it at 80% and you land, you're going to win rounds, right? You're absolutely going to win rounds. And Holloway isn't the type of guy that just takes shots to take them, right? He's going to respect certain shots. We saw that against Volkanovski. Got cracked and said, okay, no problem. Let me try and think about a different way to do this. I suspect if Korean Zombie, I was going to call him Volkanovski. We're not doing that fight. If Korean Zombie can find a way to get the respect of Max Holloway and show Max Holloway that he's not just going to be pushed back, he's not just going to follow footwork, we're going to have an interesting battle on our hands. I also would say that Max Holloway, Korean Zombie should be throwing in some takedowns. Again, Max Holloway is very hard to take down and very hard to hold down when he's taken down. But again, if you allow Max Holloway to maraud forward,
exactly. You got to take him off his pattern and you got to take him out of his kind of flow, because when Max Holloway gets into that full flow, it's the one big criticism, having looked back at the Calvin Kattar fight as well, like in comparison to this one, you know, 2 strikers as well. You know, I think Max Holloway will probably not be too concerned that Korean Zombie is going to look to take him down. Now, it will be up to the Korean Zombie to kind of create that doubt by trying to take him down, take him off his slow. But Calvin Kattar never tried that once. And he allowed Max Holloway to get into such a flow where he got to a point where that there was no return. Now, what leg kicks, that's a great way of taking somebody out of their flow. That's out of their rhythm. Going for takedowns and going hell for leather for takedowns are different things. You know, you can commit to takedowns and drain your own gas tank, or you can just close the distance and kind of make the illusion that you want to take the fight down. But that's just creating another avenue and another way that Max Holloway has to kind of think that how you're going to try and approach this certain fight. And I think with Korean Zombie mixing it up here, you know, walking him down and trying to trade off at Max Holloway, like you said, I think it was the perfect way to describe it, is a recipe for disaster. I think you mix it up, you try your best. And even at that, Harry, even if he does do that, it's still going to be relatively difficult for the Korean Zombie, really, isn't it?
Yeah, but look at Ian Garry. Ian Garry went out and incapacitated Neil Magny in 3 kicks. Now, I'm not saying that Korean Zombie should go and, you know, spend the next fight week just fucking drilling low calf kicks. Mm-hmm. What I am saying is look at the ability and look at the detriment that those sorts of attacks can have if planted and landed properly. Ian Garry won a fight in 15 seconds with 3 kicks.
100%, because we've said it time and time again here on the preview show and the breakdown. You know, the introduction of calf kicks or low leg kicks or whatever you want to call them into mixed martial arts is being so kind of influential, because all you need is one. And I think, you know, he with Ian Garry, it almost happened after 1 kick, you know, and the second and the third were definite. The second and the third were getting him off his feet, but you could see it. That's all it takes. And if that happens at the start of the fight, you've got to deal with that for the rest of the fight too. And
right.
Look, it's about Korean Zombie creating these avenues for himself to kind of win this fight. I'm looking forward to this one. I have a feeling that this could at stages turn out to be an absolute war. I think, you know, Holloway will just get into himself a little bit. I think Korean Zombie will kind of be trying to walk him down, landing shots, taking shots, and I'm very interested to see what the outcome of it is. Likely scenario for me, Max Holloway. Any final thoughts, Harry?
Oh, sorry, go on, finish what you were going to say. Likely thoughts, Max Holloway.
Likely talks Max Holloway is probably going to get his hand raised no matter what way this fight goes, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I think this is, I agree with you, and I gave my thoughts on what I think will happen. Sorry, what I think should happen. What I think will happen is the Korean Zombie is fighting essentially at home, right? This is a main event for him. This is a marquee event for him. This is a landmark in his career. You best believe he's not just going to go and roll over if it gets a bit tough in a couple of rounds. He is 110%. I mean, you never know. This could be the Korean Zombie's last fight. Like,
I was going to say, it was actually, you know, that kind of sparked my thought. 36 years of age. It could be his swan song, and he might just decide to go out there and throw all hell at Max Holloway. And I think if he does, that's going to make for an absolutely insane fight, to be honest. But yeah, it'd be sad if he does, but it'd be a good way to go out against the legend over in your neck of the woods. It would be an awesome way for a Korean Zombie to go out. Yeah, let's move on to the co-main event. Not as a riveting of a contest as the main event at all. Anthony Smith back in the octagon, taking on Ryan Spann. Anthony Smith coming back off 3 defeats in a row now, Harry, against Magomed Ankalaev, Johnny Walker. And, you know, he lost the grappling match to Glover Teixeira, but that's not really considered one. A win over Ryan Spann in 2021. He's back in against Ryan Spann again. What do you think of this fight? They're putting these guys together again. I'm credit to Anthony Smith for taking this, only coming off the back of a win over Ryan Spann 2 years ago. This is like kind of more of an opportunity for Ryan Spann to put himself back into the mix after his loss to Nikita Krylov last time out. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, this fight doesn't intrigue me that much.
It's a horrendous fight, like horrendous.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? Like, it feels at this point like Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann have probably fought 15 times already. Like,
yeah,
when I saw it, I was like, I'm sure these lads have fought 3 times already. Like, I'm sure they have. I'm gonna say it again, right? Like I said, on this card, there are some absolutely amazing matchups. There are some fantastic fighters on this card. I don't understand. For Anthony Smith specifically, there's a couple of things I'm going to say. For Anthony Smith specifically, why are we still doing this? You know, you've got a nice cushy job behind the desk. You're pretty good at it. Why do we need this? Right? It's not like we're championship material. It's not like we're going to turn around and get a title shot if we win this fight. It's not like, you know, in the Johnny Walker fight, he was telling Johnny Walker that he robbed his house to try and amp himself up to go out and do the things.
On Johnny that was fairly harrowing. Like, the backstory to that is
insane.
Anthony Smith's family's house was broken into, and they had stuff stolen. I think, you know, it turned into a pretty serious situation where there was kind of, you know, Smith got into the mindset that he was actually facing the perpetrators who did that robbery against Johnny Walker. Just crazy to hear him say that. You said you put my family at risk in the middle. Johnny Walker was looking at him wondering what the hell is going on. I never said anything about your family. But that's a crazy mindset to be in, like a kind of a level of post-traumatic stress as well at the same time.
For sure. And it's that I look at and I'm like, oh, this is bigger than fighting. Right? Like, we don't need to be doing this. And I mean that from the UFC's perspective, you know? Like, it's all well and good in a post-fight press conference to come out and say, oh, we're not going to give Chris Weidman a fight anymore because, you know, he tore his MCL and whatever. Some lad's just gone, and after having his house broken into, literally had his family at risk, and you've got all this stuff, and he literally works for you. He's not a contractor. I mean, he is a contractor, but you know what I mean? Like, he's UFC staff, and you're like, sure, chuck him in there. Let's see what's going to happen. Like, and even afterwards.
Well, he's the company man, isn't he, Harry? He has been for a while. Obviously, look at that. You never bite the hand that feeds you, is what they say. But look, he's been put in with these fights, and you know, he's been given this fight, I would feel, in his opinion, maybe UFC as a chance to get in there and get a win. Maybe he's chasing that one last elusive win before he finally decides to hang him up. But I mean, we could have had this same conversation after the beatdown that Glover Teixeira gave to him when they actually did fight mixed martial arts. and that was horrific. At that stage, you know, you're wondering what's left, and it's the lure of the battle, Harry. It's the adrenaline rush. It's the affection from the crowd when you come out. It's the landing good shots. It's taking shots. I mean, that's a drug that's so hard to replace when you're a professional fighter, when you've felt it for so many years. You're left with the wonder of what's next after. But we know what's next after this for Anthony Smith. It's not a complete separation from mixed martial arts. He's an excellent analyst. He's on with Michael Bisping on the Believe You Me podcast. Speaks very well. And, you know, we want to continue seeing him speaking very well, and going in there and getting the shit kicked out of you or taking more brain trauma is not the way to do that. But this is kind of the sad reality that surrounds this fight, Harry, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna lament the placement on the card as well. Like, we're gonna get to Erin Blanchfield, Talia Santos shortly.
That's the one that should be the co-main event.
What are we doing? Like I understand.
I would even and I wanted to wait. We'll talk about it a little bit more. I would even question Erin Blanchfield's and Talia Santos's placement on this card, let alone where they're placed on the card itself. Like, why is Erin Blanchfield and Talia Santos stuck on a Singapore card, the opening fight of the main card, where it's on at 3 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning in North America, and barely anybody is going to see it there? You're talking about the biggest prospect in the 125-pound division. Like I said, sorry, back to the co-main event. You know, that the co-main event slot here for Anthony Smith and Spann is very, very questionable.
I agree, because as we've said over and over again, and both of us, Spencer included, Shawnee included, we're all pretty romantic about placements on cards. And I know that to fighters, it might not mean anything because they're not getting paid anything different, and it just means that they walk at a different time and whatever. I get all of that. But to me, there is a meaning to it. The UFC is intending to put people on certain positions on certain cards because they are aware historically, and even now, people don't watch fights from the very first prelim unless it's a media member, or unless it's somebody that, you know, they're going to UFC London and it hasn't been there for 3 years. They'll turn up for the first prelim, no stress. But generally, if you look at a Vegas card, if you look at any North America card where they're getting shows regularly, people don't turn up until 3 fights from the finish. You know, sometimes they'll start at the main card and they'll go from there. But very, very, very often you see fights in fight arenas empty for certain fights. And that, I think, when you're talking about Erin Blanchfield, like, essentially we're looking at a number one contendership fight here, right? And that's buried on the Singapore.
It's insane. It's insane. Well, look let's talk about Ryan Spann for a minute. We can talk about Blanchfield Santos a little bit. For Brian Spann, I mean, he's coming back off a defeat here. He's looking at an opportunity here, coming back to get a win over Anthony Smith. Number one, get that win back for Smith. Number two, propel him into maybe another kind of a top 10 fight where he could potentially put himself into the title mix.
100%.
That was supposed to be the plan the last time out, Harry, for Ryan Spann. It didn't work out that way. He got finished by Nikita Krylov, and it's back to square one now for Ryan Spann. And I think that's been a little bit of the story of his career so far. 2 steps forward, 1 step forward, 2 steps back is what I meant to say. Is that kind of your assessment as well?
Yeah, I mean, he's a freak athlete, right? Like, he's an absolute freak. Go and watch the Johnny Walker fight and tell me that's not a freak athlete. You know what I mean? Like, that man can do things with his body and get out of positions that he absolutely should never be able to get out of, and he can. And so it feels to me, and has felt like to me in all of his career, that, you know, when I always do this, I apologize, but I'm going to do it again. When we're in the gym, right, and you look at sport grappling, there's always a couple of fellas who are really, really, really good athletes, and they excel really early, really, really fast, because their athleticism gets them in and out of certain positions that they don't necessarily have to work into or work out of. They just explode through them. And for a portion of time, that works. And then skill sets come up, and athleticism diminishes in terms of its value. If you can do what Ryan Spann can do, and you can add a skill set on top of it that's equal or better than your athleticism, you're talking about an elite level fighter, right? That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
The problem for Spann is that he hasn't quite been able to put everything together consistently. Now, the reason why this specific fight is a fantastic opportunity for him is because if you want to find an Anthony Smith at a portion of his career where he's the easiest to finish or the easiest to land on, it's right now. And we have seen that when Ryan Spann lands on dudes, they go to sleep, right? And so I think for this specific matchup, the UFC puts it together because it's obvious and known that if you grapple Ryan Spann, you're going to be able to win. You may not be able to finish him, but you're going to be able to win. He doesn't stuff takedowns well. He doesn't reverse takedowns well. His get-ups are athletic, great, but they're not fastly technical. So if you're somebody like Anthony Smith, who can grapple, right? Knows how to grapple. Okay, you lose to Glover in a grappling match. Fine. These things happen in MMA. But he can grapple. And so that's the route to victory for Anthony Smith. And it's a relatively simple route to victory. The route to Ryan Spann is just put your fist on his chin and good things will happen.
Immediately. It'll be interesting to see if Anthony Smith does kind of play around with the grappling here, because I agree with you as well. That's the gaping hole in Ryan Spann's game. He took advantage of it the last time, and I can see no reason for Anthony Smith not going in there and trying to do the same. I think this is all down to Ryan Spann and Ryan Spann only on the result of this fight. I think if Spann has corrected those errors, has got his mentality right, and approaches this and game plans and has good fight IQ on the night, he gets the win. If he doesn't, we're going to see Smith take him down. He might get up once or twice, but like you said, when you don't have technique behind your get up or your takedown defense, you have to use strength, and there's only so long that you can use strength and force when you're getting up before you get tired, and that will be the story of this fight. Moving on next to the 145-pound division, Giga Chikadze is back, and he'll take on Bruce Leroy Alex Caceres. I mean, we haven't seen Giga for a long time, Harry, and it'll be interesting to see how he looks here. Obviously coming off a defeat to Calvin Kattar in his last contest, but, you know, showcasing some fantastic abilities there on the feet. And I feel if he comes out and shows probably 60 to 70% of those skills, he absolutely wipes the floor with Alex Caceres here, who, you know, not to try and sound disrespectful to Caceres, because himself, he's proved a lot of doubters wrong recently, but, you know, he's there for the taking, in my view. You know, a good win against Daniel Pineda in his last fight, but I feel when he's coming up at this level of competition that he might be left wanting a little bit. What was your assessment of this fight?
Yeah, I agree. The big question marks for me here is how does Giga look? 34, massive layoff. Where are we? You know, like before the layoff, we were talking about potential title ramifications very, very, very quickly, right? Very, very impressive. And then he goes out and, okay, you drop a fight to Calvin Kattar. These things happen, you know, like it happens. It's fine, whatever. There's a difference between elite level competition like Max Holloway and then losing a fight to Calvin Kattar, who's just that notch underneath, right? It's fine. It's no problem. But again, when you've got the time to go away and think about those mistakes and ruminate on them and really look to fix them, that's fine. 31 doesn't look too bad. 34, we're looking at a very different prospect now. And so
plus having to deal with a lot of injuries in that time too. That's why we haven't seen him in such a long time, and it's hard to kind of get your spot. Like, you know, you made a great point about, you know, Conor and other fighters as well. When your body starts to let you down, that's when doubt starts creeping in. That's where you start maybe changing your approach and how you fight, and kind of when you're in the cage, you're not maybe throwing the shots like you used to. You're not moving like you're used to. You're fighting a little bit more cautiously and defensively, because you just want to survive rather than win. I think we saw a perfect example of that in Chris Weidman, guy who, you know, for a short spell of time was fighting to win, but slowly kind of that win got drawn out of him, where he was just basically fighting to survive towards the end of that fight. It'll be interesting to see what happens here with Chikadze, because, yeah, like I said, a win over Calvin Kattar, and he was right in the mix there at 145. But, you know, when time ain't your friend and you've been out of the cage, you know, ring rust is a thing sometimes for fighters, apart from Dominic Cruz. But we'll see what happens here. This is, you would have to think, if we see anywhere close to the Giga that we did see back in the early days in 2022, he should come in there and win easily, though. Although Caceres, like I said, is tricky enough on the feet too.
I think Alex Caceres is awkward on the feet. I don't know that he's necessarily tricky. I just think he's awkward. Just throws weird shit at weird angles. But that's not anything that Chikadze won't have seen before, won't have had to deal with before. And if, like you say, if Chikadze comes out, I'll go out on a limb. If Chikadze looks anything like we're used to, he stops him in a round. 100%. If he doesn't, and like, don't get me wrong, Chikadze could come out and want 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
You could want 15 minutes because you could say, oh, look, I've been off for a long time. I just want to feel the octagon underneath me. I want to feel the crowd. I want to get the minutes in. I want to really, really soak myself back in. Fine. If that's what he wants to do, and he'll tell us that very early on. But I suspect a finish will present itself if he wants it to. And if he does, and he takes it, grand, I can see it happening quick.
Caceres could also look for the takedown here because you would think that there's a clear advantage in that department for him. And it would be the smart move to do here, especially early days, even if, you know, you don't want to rely on it all fight. What you'll do here if you're facing a striking disadvantage, it's the same as what we told Korean Zombie to do in the main event, is mix it up a little bit, close the distance. You don't want to let Jigga come in here and fight this fight on the outside at his kicking range, because that's where he's at his most dangerous. He's good boxing, don't get me wrong. So does Alex as well. But, you know, I'm looking for Alex here to come in to get Giga backing up. You know, there's going to be so much doubt in Giga's mind for the first minute or two, and you have to keep the fucking doubt in his mind for being away for so long. Don't let him get settled into the fight, because as soon as that starts to happen, you know, that's when Giga is going to open up and we could see some problems for Alex Caceres. But I think, you know, I'm not necessarily shoot from the outside with double legs. Close the distance, get your body lock takedown, push him up against the fence, make him work early, and create that little bit of doubt in Giga's mind. And you never know what might happen after that.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, right? But like, there's going to be a portion of time where Giga Chikadze is going to have to culminate reads. He's going to have to. He's going to have to accumulate them, and he's going to have to work out exactly what Caceres is doing and what sort of angles he actually comes with. And those are your moments, right? In that first 2.5 minutes, if Caceres can close the distance and put him on his back, Chikadze's now got to think about, oh, okay, well, where are the striking angles coming from? I've just been taken down. I'm 3 years out. Like you said, put the doubt in his mind and keep it there. And remember that this is an MMA fight, right? Like, we're not back in glory now. This is an MMA fight. So let's use it.
Absolutely. Someone who didn't realize they were in an MMA fight was Nakamura when he burst onto the scene on the road to the UFC. 7-0 right now is the Japanese bantamweight. He comes in against Fernie Garcia. And look, we had a brand new superstar born last weekend, Harry, and Sean O'Malley in this division. And we're looking at the future of the division here. And you know me, man, I'll go out on a limb. But what I've seen so far from this guy is a sensation. And I cannot wait to see him in action again. And it seems like it's been a while considering how quick his last fight was, but maybe they were waiting for an opportunity like this to put him on a card in Singapore or in China or wherever they wanted to put him on over in Asia. The perfect setting for him. But I feel with another dominant win here, we're going to see him flirting with some cards on the US market pretty soon. And I would expect him to go in there and do the job relatively easy against Fernie Garcia. 2 losses in a row for Garcia. And this might be, you know, him stamping his ticket out of the UFC because they put him in there with an absolute killer. Your thoughts on Nakamura overall and how the fight is going to go?
We've got one here, boys.
Absolutely, we do.
We've got.
And I get excited, but my excitement is justified here.
Like, don't get me
the Harry Powell stamp of approval here now.
Damn fucking right. Like, I think, and I've said it before many times, I think high-level grappling is the best base for MMA. The best base. Look at the ability that Bo Nickel is having. You add on. Obviously, there's a ton to add on, right? A ton to add on when it comes to the striking and the cage wrestling and everything else. But cage wrestling is transferable skills from your regular grappling. Jiu-jitsu or submission defense, you can add on, right? When you're looking at your grappling, because you already understand a ton of the ground positions, a ton of the control positions. You just need to focus on adding on melding everything together, one, but adding the striking elements too. Now that's an entire career's worth of additions. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downplaying that. But if you have a grappling background like a Bo Nickel or like a Rinya Nakamura, by God, have we got something. And you just look at his record, right? I'm just going to run through his record. At 0-0, he fought a guy that was 1-1-1. Fine. That's absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. 1-0, he fights a guy with 10 fights. Next fight, fights a guy with 7 fights, winning record, 5-1 and 2 losses. Next guy, the only guy to take him to decision, was a fella with 30 fights in his 3rd professional fight. Yeah?
Insane.
He's now on the road to UFC. And look, sure, you get matched with who you get matched with. He finishes all of them in under 15 minutes total. Grand. We've got one. No problem. I think he absolutely runs through Fernie Garcia. I don't think that there's going to be much for us to be looking at. No. I suspect that he gets the severe spotlight because I suspect it's going to be violent. I suspect it's going to be quick, and I suspect we're going to see some really good shit. Obviously, this is MMA, anything can happen, but I am pretty high on him. And I also think at 28 years of age, now's the time to push him too.
Yeah, that was going to be the way I was going to kind of lead the conversation as well. Right. 28 years of age, we ain't got time. But we do have time to play around here, but we ain't got time to be playing around too much with guys like Fernie Garcia. We need to start seeing some legitimate challenges after this. Now, and we don't want to be speaking too out of turn, but the likelihood of this, it would be very, very surprising if he doesn't go out here and not alone get the finish, but get a 1st round finish here. I think that's what he's going to be primed up for. And then we should see a rapid ascent up the bantamweight division in a couple of names. Do you think that, we will start seeing him on a couple of pay-per-view cards perhaps, or coming on fight night in the US? We need to get him a little bit more prime time to get, because I think there's still a lot of people out there who don't really realize how good that this guy is. Like Spencer, in fairness, had highlighted him to us watching 100%. The road to the UFC. I went back and checked him out, and I was like, fucking Spence, you're right, man. This guy is a fucking killer and very well developed for a guy that's just 7-0 as well. We know that he has his wrestling credentials, but also showing fairly sharp striking abilities as well, and also has power in his hands, which is a very big help, in the lighter weight classes too. I mean, this guy ticks off a lot of boxes, Harry.
Damn right. Very, very high on him. And again, props to Spencer for the shout out. He was the one that noticed him first on his road to UFC coverage. And he told me immediately, like live, I woke up to a text at fucking 4 a.m. and he said, boys, we've got one. This fella he's a something. I just want to, maybe this is something for the breakdown, right? Maybe we shouldn't do it now, but I'm excited, so I want to do it now. Yeah. If I was to plan the next couple of fights, if he gets over this, the next one, we do Hani Barcelos because it's a name, it's a step up in veteran competition. And then after that, we do Mario Bautista.
Yeah, I like it. And we'll probably get into that a little bit in more detail on the balance breakdown next Tuesday as well. Tune in to hear more of how we would like to see Nakamura break up the rest of the 135-pound division. Really excited to see that, even if it might, it kind of looks like a mismatch on paper, but I just get excited about seeing talents as good as Nakamura. So, and credit to him, and credit to Erin Blanchfield and Talia Santos as well. 2 extremely good talents as well in the women's flyweight division. And look, we've kind of teased some of our opinions on this fight already, Harry, and the placement of this on the card itself. And I think, it should be a co-main event slot at the very least. I think it's strange that both of these women are fighting on this card that's not on prime time in the US. I mean, you look at the Australia card that's happening in a couple of weeks. It's not great. It is absolutely horrendous. I go as far as to say, why don't we fucking put this fight on that card or something like that? Like, give it a little bit of life. But look at it's here. We're going to enjoy it as much as we would, no matter what card it's placed. So we won't spend too much time on it. But what we have here is a fantastic battle. It's Erin Blanchfield going up against former title challenger Talia Santos, and you know, it's a chance for Erin Blanchfield to go out there and prove that, you know, she is the next coming. She is the future of the 125-pound division. She's been on a hell of a run recently, picking up wins, and is currently undefeated in her UFC tenure so far. Wins over Miranda Maverick, JJ Aldrich, Molly McCann, and more impressively and recently, Jessica Andrade, where she went out there and got the finish. Another tough test for Erin Blanchfield here, but I'm excited to see how she tackles it, Harry. How are you feeling about this one?
This is MMA versus MMA. Really is. I cannot overstate how technical this is going to be, right? Talia Santos, really, really dominant grappler, can absolutely do the things. We saw her against Valentina Shevchenko. We saw how hard she was hitting Valentina. We saw the leg kicks. We saw the anti-grappling. We saw the positive grappling. We saw everything. That was about as close you get to beating Valentina without actually doing it, right? And then we have 24-year-old Erin Blanchfield. Like, this woman is an absolute phenom. The rise, we talk about Max Holloway earlier on the card, right? And we talk about him, one, growing up maturity-wise in the UFC, but also we talk about him growing up from a skills perspective in the UFC. Jesus fucking Christ, have we watched Erin Blanchfield grow in the UFC? Like, we go back to her first fight, Sarah Alpar, right? I remember that fight. Wasn't great. She dominated. She won. Wasn't great. We then have the Miranda Maverick fight. Two massive prospects together. Performed really well in that one. The JJ Aldrich fight, she's getting jabbed up pretty aggressively, and then she grabs a guillotine. Fine.
Yeah, things are not looking good for her in that fight.
That was 2022. It was just over a year ago. She comes out and absolutely mauls Molly McCann. Decimates Molly McCann. And then she comes out and does that to Jessica Andrade, beats her on the feet, beats her in the grappling, finishes her. Unbelievable. Now, don't get me wrong. Jessica Andrade is absolutely coming to the tail end of her career. Make no mistake about that. But to still go out and outstrike Jessica Andrade the way that she did, and then to make the transition to the finish look so simple, incredible. Absolutely incredible. This fight, to me, is going to be, I know I say this all the time and I sound like a broken record, but it's going to be won in the range battles, right? Neither women are massive kickers. I think Talia Santos may be the better kicker. I think Erin Blanchfield is the better straight puncher. Talia Santos carries more power. Erin Blanchfield seems to have the more systematic grappling approach. Talia Santos is a better athlete. So we're just, styles for this just match up so beautifully, If Talia Santos wins, she stakes a claim a rematch at Valentina Shevchenko. If Valentina Shevchenko wins, obviously. If she doesn't, Grasso's right there. And exactly the same for Erin Blanchfield. If Erin Blanchfield wins here, I think she gets the winner of Valentina and Grasso. And so, yeah, sign me up for this. I couldn't be more excited. What a fucking fight this is. What a fucking fight.
Brilliant fight. And I'm really looking forward for this happening so that we can break it down. Like, it's the type of fight that you can't wait to break down before it even happens. That's the sign of a good one. But it's also exciting to see Erin Blanchfield and you know, her being the new wave of talent in women's mixed martial arts. You know, we discussed it a little bit on the breakdown for UFC 292 about Zhang Wei Li and her skill set and what she's bringing to the table and how that's developing and growing mixed martial arts. And she's piggybacking off the work, of course, of Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey before that, and Cyborg as well. We never mentioned Cyborg at on the breakdowns, and she definitely deserves a mention as well. But you know, very, very excited to see Erin Blanchfield and see if she can pass this test, and if we can kind of see her, you know, see her a good spell on the feet and see how much more she has developed since the Jessica Andrade fight, because, you know, that was a fantastic striking display. She surprised everybody, but she'll have a lot more to handle on the feet, I feel, with Talia Santos, who will be coming back after the disappointment, of course, of losing that title shot to Valentina Shevchenko, and will be hungry to throw herself back into the mix. Very exciting fight in the 125-pound division. Which brings us to Junior Tafa and Parker Porter. I think Parker Porter, Harry, is on a one-man mission to take out the Tafa family here. Is that kind of the story of this fight?
Who cares? I'm sorry. Who cares? Like, what are we like? We talked before about main cards, placements, all this stuff. What do we expect? I mean, what are we expecting in this fight? Like, this is Junior Tafa's probably going to walk over, put hands on Parker Porter, and he's going to fall over. Like, that's probably what's going to happen, And if not, somebody will eye poke Junior Tafa so bad that he can't continue.
Well, you deserve a medal if that happens. If you call it like that.
If I call it, have play. But
yeah, I can't get into this fight. Like, even Parker Porter, he's getting not beyond his years as well. 38 right now, not going to make too much of a move up the rankings. A win over Braxton Smith in 5-1. He's coming in here and fighting a 4-1 guy. A massive gap in kind of experience in the last fight, which showed, and could be the same this one here. Like, is he good enough to get the win over Junior Tafa? Yes, he is. But does it mean anything? Probably not really, if we're being honest with ourselves. So, I
apologize, by the way. I confused Justin and Junior. I apologize.
Yeah. No, Junior is. Are they related? Are they related?
Absolutely no idea.
I have no idea either. Let's say we are for the crack anyway. Let's say both of them, Junior Tafa 26, and Justin is the same. Yeah, I don't know. Let's just say they are for the crack anyway. Yeah, who cares? Let's move on to the prelims. Don't take our word on that. There we are, top class journalism right there. Moving on to the prelims, Harry. We'll give a quick brush through of the prelims. First fight listed on the prelims card, as I see it, Walde Cortez Acosta versus Luskas Brzeski. I know Sean Denny has been talking a little bit about Luskas on Twitter, saying that he's a man that is going to throw many a hook in this fight, coming over, having lost his last two fights against Martin Budai and Carl Williams, comes in against Waldo Costa Cortez, who I believe lost his last fight, and which was his first loss of his career, was it? Yes, against Marcus Rodrigo de Lima. Much the same as the last heavyweight fight, Harry. Not too much to kind of break down on this one. Any thoughts on this one, or anything that does stick out to you on the prelims card?
Yeah, I think the hook that Brzeski should be looking at is the one that his coat's on, because he's probably taking it after this one. Like, he's just not a good fighter. Like, he's just not.
What a line! What a line!
Neither of them are good fighters. Like, I'm sorry. They're just not. They're just not.
Yeah, it's fair. That's fair. Anything else that's sticking out to you? Look, next on the card, Toshiomi Kazama versus.
Sign me up for this one. Yeah,
you like this one? 135. I think, you know what, you could put any two fighters in there in the UFC right now, and once I see that it's in the 135-pound division, it's sure cert that it's going to be a banger, because I can't remember the last 135-pound fight that I've watched that wasn't good in certain way, whether it was a brawl, whether it was a technical battle, whether, excitement in one way or another. The 135-pound division is shit hot right now in the UFC.
100%. Sorry, I was struggling to turn my mute off there. Look, you go out and you lose your last fight to Rinya Nakamura. We've just waxed lyrical for about 58 minutes about Rinya Nakamura. These things are going to happen in MMA. Don't worry about it, right? I think Toshiomi Kazama didn't get to really show who he was in that final because you're fighting Rinya Nakamura. That's fine. I have absolutely no issue with this fight. I think it's a great match. Garrett Armfield knows what he's doing in there, well-rounded enough. And this is the litmus test now, right? Like, this is the UFC litmus test. We're not going to push you to the moon like we are Rinya Nakamura, because one, you're 26 years old, so we still got time, right? Don't worry about that. We still got time. But this is a Garrett Armfield fight where he can fight wherever you want to take it. If you want to stand, grand. If you want to grapple, grand. No problem. We can do all of that. This is just if you're going to be something, or if we're going to consider you to potentially be something in this 135-pound division, you go out and you beat Garrett Armfield, right? And so I like the matchup. I like the test. And he gets to wipe away the taste of that pretty horrendous 33-second loss. He's an all-action fighter, goes out, throws it all on the line, which is, what got him caught in the fight with Rinya Nakamura. And so Garrett Armfield's got his hands full, but we're going to find out. This is I like this type of matchup because we're going to find out to steal.
Yeah, Yeah, yes, yeah. I think so too. Like, I mean, you can go in there and panic a little bit when you are fighting a guy like Nakamura, when you know how good he is. That you got to get that guy like that out maybe in the first minute or two, or you're fucked. And that's exactly what happened. You ended up getting caught. But look, it'll be interesting to see. Chidian Chukani takes on Michael Olejenchuk in the 185 pound division, and this could be a stand up banger if we're going anything off of these two guys and their past performances.
Yeah, it's middleweight, so it'll be shite. But
a shite stand-up fight.
I suspect it will be a stand-up fight. Yeah, I suspect it'll be a stand-up fight. Oli Olenchuk's got a nice body kick, got a decent hook on him, but yeah, not much else than that. Chidian Jokawani is long, has really, really strong kicks, has some nice elbows when he steps in. But again, neither fantastic fighters, but an evenly matched fight.
Chidi kind of fell off a little bit, whereas he had a couple of decent, like his introduction was pretty good. Wins over Marc-Andre Barriault, which is still a good win now this day, but considering how Barriault is fighting. Dusko Todorovic, he's all right, but you finished him with an elbow inside the first round. But since then, Gregory Rodriguez has beaten him. Albert Durayev beaten by split decision the last time. And no, he's coming in here against Olejenchuk, and it's a chance for him to kind of pick up a win. Like Olejenchuk is also hunting for a return back into the win column after his loss to Bahalio in his last fight. So look at two guys turning off defeats. Middleweight, without sounding too disrespectful, middleweight mediocrity is probably what is going to be expected in this fight as well. Moving on down, Song Kenan coming back after his defeat over against Ian Gary. Look at he after Ian Gary's performance, man, he's the guy who has hurt Ian Gary the most in his career so far. Interesting to see how he responds against Rolando Bedoya. Any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think this is trying to get Bedoya a win, or really to find out where he is. You go and you lose a split decision against Chaos Williams, and it kind of tells us something, but not a lot of something, And so Song Kenan, Aski and Gary, he hits pretty fucking hard if you let him. And so this is what can Rolando do here? Does he go out? Does he get the fight down? Does he look for subs? Who are we? Right? Who are we? What are we doing? I got no problem with the matchup. Fair play to both men.
You almost sounded like a Spurs fan there for a second when you were announcing that. That's an inside joke that maybe some people will get and others won't. I'm going to do the dirty work for you for the last three fights, Harry, because there's not too much to talk about this unless you want to come in and do it. Yusaku Kinoshita will take on Billy Goff in the 170-pound division. Liang Na will take on JJ Aldrich. I have a soft spot for JJ Aldrich. I like her style. I like how she presents herself in there, always going for the attack. Suwoo Choi will take on Jarno Erens in the opening fight of the card at 145-pound division. That takes us through the card, like I said. Over to you, Harry, for a quick outro before we wrap it up on some of the expectations, some of your thoughts heading out into going to watch this card.
Absolutely. I mean, Kinoshita, interesting fighter. You go out and you lose to Adam Fujit. Adam Fujit's a decent fighter, right? Like, I've got no problem with that. I am massive on Nakamura, as we said. I'm really intrigued in Kazama. Let's see what he does. The Erin Blanchfield Talia Santos is just such an incredible fight, and I absolutely can't wait for it. Obviously, rightfully so. Max Holloway at the top of the card. No problem with that whatsoever. I hope both men get through that fight safely and are able to go home to their families with no problem by the end of it, because that's going to be an absolute fucking screamer of a fight. Giga Chikadze, massive intrigue there for Giga. Who are you? What do you look like? What are you coming back as? Let me see it. And I'm just deflated by a lot of the rest of the card, to be honest. Like, Anthony Smith, Ryan Spann makes me want to hurl into a bowl. Junior Tafa, Parker Porter, followed by Waldo Cortez Acosta. Lads, in those fucking 15 minutes, go and get yourself a couple.
If I do fucking wake up at 4 o'clock and those two fights are on, that's a sure way of me falling back asleep in the wee hours of Saturday morning. But interesting nonetheless. Like we said, little bits of decency spread about this card. Good fights, good storylines, and absolutely title eliminators, thrown right in the mix. At BJJ_Harry Powell is where you'll find that man. Go over and check out all of his stuff. At O'Neill MMA is where I am at on social media. We'll be back to break down this card in full detail on Tuesday morning for your pleasure. Until then, we will see you. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and give us an old follow. Thank you very much. Goodbye. God bless.